Hey there YouTube, I'm Forrest, Latter-day Skeptic. In today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into moral philosophy. This will be a three-part series where I present to you a moral theory that I've been working on that I believe creates a new paradigm for atheistic morality. In part one, I'll lay out the case for this new paradigm. In part two, we'll consider some interesting implications, and part three, we'll apply this new paradigm to society and culture. So to start off, I want to lay out a common philosophical conversation. When someone does anything, why do they do it? For example, when you go to the store, why did you go to the store? Probably because you wanted to get food. And why did you want to get food? Because you wanted to eat. And why did you want to eat? Because you were hungry. And why did you care that you were hungry? Because being hungry causes you to suffer. And of course, none of us like to suffer. At the end of this long chain of why questions has to be some end. And for many people, that end is well-being or happiness, joy, or eudaimonia.
Virtue theory says that you should become virtuous because if you are, then you can attain the pinnacle of humanity. It allows you to achieve what's known as eudaimonia. This is a cool Greek word that doesn't have a simple English translation. You might say it means a life well lived. It's sometimes translated as human flourishing. And a life of eudaimonia is a life of striving. It's a life of pushing yourself to your limits and finding success. A eudaimonistic life will be full of the happiness that comes from achieving something really difficult rather than just having it handed to you. But choosing to live a eudaimonistic life means that you're never done improving. You're never to a point where you can just coast. You're constantly setting new goals and working to develop new muscles. Choosing to live life in this way also means you'll face disappointments and failures. Eudaimonia doesn't mean a life of cupcakes and rainbows. It means the sweet pleasure of sinking into bed at the end of an absolutely exhausting day. It's the satisfaction of knowing you've accomplished a lot and that you've pushed yourself to be the very best person you could be. This is morality for Aristotle. It's being the best person you can be, honing your strengths while working on your weaknesses.
This line of reasoning has really seen a reemergence amongst atheists, with books like The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris really contributing to the conversation.
There's this idea in science that science can help us get what we value, but it can never tell us what we ought to value. And that's something that I'm challenging in this book. Well, when I think about questions of right and wrong and good and evil in universal terms, I think in terms of a moral landscape where the peaks correspond to the heights of human happiness and the valleys correspond to the lowest depths of misery. When you ask the question, how can we move upwards on this landscape, both personally and collectively? Clearly there are right and wrong answers to that question. And these are answers because human well-being emerges out of our biology and out of our sociology and out of the way the universe is altogether. These are answers which in principle science can discover.
This line of thinking has become very popular, and many atheists have adapted it as their way of thinking about morality. Here are two of my favorite YouTubers discussing this exact topic: Stephen Woodford of Rationality Rules and Alex O'Connor, who runs the channel Cosmic Skeptic.
But as far as breaking it down to one thing, yes, it really is just all down to pleasure. Okay. And I find that no matter who you talk to on the topic of morality, no matter where they're coming from, be them religious, as I was saying earlier, or whether them being secular, although there's a significant amount of the secular population that just believes it's just a cultural construct, which drives me nuts. I think it's sad. Whoever you take who's arguing for some kind of objective morality, you can break them down and you will always get down to this pleasure-pain dynamic. You know, you take the Christian down, you go, well, why should we obey God? Because you'll go to hell forever. Why should I care about that? Because suffering sucks. Like,
all of these guys are great moral thinkers. However, I believe they're all wrong, including Aristotle. They're so close, but they're missing this critical component that I really believe will solve many of the common complaints that are brought up about this well-being conception of morality. And here's the subtle but crucial difference. The purpose of all action is not pleasure. It's not joy. It's not well-being. It's not suffering. It's not even eudaimonia. The purpose of all action is the desire for those things, the desire itself, what I will call the independent want. Let's go back and look at the example of going to the grocery store. We end that chain of why questions with the answer because we don't want to suffer. But we take suffering as the end rather than the want as the end. We could continue to ask, well, why do you not want to suffer? To which you would rightfully reply, well, I don't know, I just don't want to. This foundational want is what I'm referring to as the independent want. It's the foundational desire that all of our actions are trying to satisfy. This might sound confusing, but there are a few critical insights that will help you conceptualize my claim. The first critical insight is that wanting something is different than the thing itself. For example, wanting to be happy is different than being happy. People will often conflate the two when they say things like, every person wants to be happy, therefore the end of all of our actions is happiness. Do you see the problem here? Just because we all want happiness doesn't mean that happiness is the end. We could equally ask, why happiness? To which we would reply, because we want happiness. Let's go back again and listen to the clip of Alex O'Connor and Stephen Woodford making this exact mistake.
What I'm saying, as I said, you're not born with a blank slate. It is objectively, verifiably a fact that you're born with a psychological predisposition. That's a fact. That's an is statement, which contains the should, because it's an is statement about the should.
So that's what an axiomatic ought is. It's a desire that you have instilled within you as a matter of fact, that you sort of didn't control or reason your way into. That's for you what an axiomatic ought is.
But something I'd like to just take us back to, if you will, is you were saying that you think that there's only one.
Yeah, that's where I was about to
impulse,
take it. Yeah,
cool.
So I was going to say, if that is how you're defining an axiomatic ought, then I would say that there is only one axiomatic ought, and that is pleasure. That you ought to seek pleasure, and by pleasure I also mean the avoidance of pain.
Yeah. Whoever you take who's arguing for some kind of objective morality, you can break them down, and you will always get down to this pleasure-pain dynamic.
Next time you hear this, call it out and say, no, the end of all of our action is actually the want itself. The second critical insight is actually a concept that I first heard from Alex O'Connor's video on free will. He makes a compelling argument that the reason that we do anything is either because we're forced to or because we want to.
Together. Okay, the next piece of the puzzle is to convince you of this fact, that there are only two reasons, none more in any circumstances, for which you will ever do anything. In fact, it's impossible for you to ever do anything for any reason other than one of these two. And those two reasons are because you want to or because you're forced to. And this is fundamentally important and worth really understanding and thinking about. You will only ever do anything in your entire life because you either want to or are forced to. That's it. No exceptions. And because of the fact that nobody seems to believe me on this point at first, I'll give you a common objection that I hear all the time. In fact, I recently spoke to ex-NFL player Arian Foster about free will on his podcast. Link again will be in the description once it's up. And he, playing devil's advocate, brought up the following. Consider exercise. Consider going to the gym. Most people don't want to go to the gym, but they do it anyway. Surely this is an example of someone doing something freely and not because they want to or because they're forced to. Not really. Because there has to be a reason for going to the gym. And for most people, and for Arian, it's something like to stay healthy, to stay in shape, to live longer, whatever it may be.
This is an important insight because it means that every moral action we do has a want that's before it. The last critical insight is that there's different types of wants. There's dependent wants and an independent want. A dependent want is any want that has a preceding want. For example, I want to go to the store because I want to get food. On the other hand, an independent want is any want that can't be explained by a preceding want. It's a want that I believe emerges out of the state of the universe and not because of a preceding want. I believe that the independent want comes out of the physical makeup of our brains. So let's recap. We only do things because we're forced to do them or because we want to do them. So every action that is not forced is preceded by a want. A want for something is not the same thing as the thing itself. For example, well-being is not the same thing as a want for well-being. Lastly, at the bottom of all of our dependent wants must lie an independent want, which emerges at the interface of consciousness and the physical world. The purpose of all of our actions is to satisfy this independent want. When put together, these insights create a new moral paradigm. We want, this want creates a goal, and this goal creates a reference point for all of our actions. The goal itself is not the reason for all of our actions, as many philosophers have postulated. The reason for all of our actions is always the independent want. We may all agree that well-being is the goal, but the harder question is why is it the goal? The independent want is the answer to that challenging question. That's all I've got. Go check out part 2 to see some amazing implications of this new moral paradigm. I'm Forrest, the Latter-day Skeptic. Please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.